from both the Alliance, PRCA and Pimento that were unable to join us. Let's let Chris back in again. This is one of our speakers. But just quick recap. I think it's week 27 of our Pimento Zoom events, which we've been running in association with the Alliance and the PRCA. You'll have read and heard, no doubt, and consumed in the last 24 hours the significant and not so significant changes in what we're allowed to do. Some a level of confusion that's been dealt once again to us, but according to the Department of Health and Social Health and Social Care, rather, the number of cases is now approaching 404,000 in the UK, with over 41,800 deaths, sadly. If you look at the number of excess deaths, that's the number, basically, difference between the average and the total number of people who died in the period. It's nearer 65,000. So somewhere between those two figures lays the truth. But really, in some respects, the restrictions in England in particular amount to little more than a tinkering around the edges. And I think all of us as business owners and leaders may well be confused by some of the data that's been put forward by the chief advisors on the pandemic in the last few days, where they've been reporting that cases could reach up to 50,000 a day by mid-October. Inevitably, whatever happens, obviously we are looking at a significant increase in the number of people getting infected with this terrible disease. And of course, it's a silent infection insofar as, you know, many people have been developing symptoms, but some don't develop symptoms. So it's very difficult sometimes to tell whether you are ill. What we do know in the last week or so, there have been a lot of school closures, and obviously universities have gone back, and we are seeing inevitably people picking up the common cold and they've actually got COVID. And that is inducing some need for further testing. We know about all the issues regarding test and trace. What we also know is that a full lockdown is very unlikely, that the significant impact that would have on the economy, and the attitude of the government at the moment is they're trying to avoid that at all costs. But I guess the horrible question is, we'll inevitably be asking in the next few weeks, is how much economic pain, disruption and damage to the wider health and well-being is worth the lives that may be lost. And that's really a tough call. And it's a call that kind of affects all of us, because if we employ people, if we actually have office space, if we engage in client communications, client meetings, etc., there's an onus on the individual to make those decisions. I was in Mayfair yesterday, went up to London for a meeting with a client. We were in a boardroom that normally would be sufficient for 20 people, and there was 4 people, and everybody else was on a Zoom call. Anyhow, how does that relate to where we are today? Well, back in July, we invited the heads of the leading industry associations to join us on a provocative panel discussion entitled "What have the associations ever done for us?" It was a great session, and to their credit, they all agreed to come back, so thank you to them all. I'll reintroduce them all in a second, and it's great to have them here. 2 months has gone by. There's been a lot of changes. Pleased to say there's also been a lot of progress, and progress in particular in collaborating and finding ways to work together, finding ways to protect jobs in the industry, finding ways to upskill and develop talent, and also finding ways basically to lobby government on behalf of the wider community. So it's great that has been progress. There's clearly obviously more to be done, and today's your opportunity to fire questions at the panel. We're joined by Stephen Woodford, who's the CEO of the Advertising Association. I think Stephen's well known to you, so if you forgive me, I would rather skip through his illustrious career to date and one next speaker in order that we can actually focus on questions and answers today. We've also got Francis Ingham, who's the Director General of the Public Relations and Communications Association with us. We've got Clive Mishon from the Alliance, and he'll be telling us a little bit about who the Alliance are, because since we last spoke, what was the MAAG has rebranded and it's represented, and arguably more focused really on the times that we live, and he'll tell us a bit about that today. It's great to have you back again, Charles Jarrrod from the BPIF, the British Printing Industry Federation, a very large community that represents both the print industry, graphics industry, and increasingly the digital industry. And we're also very fortunate to have Clive Combemale from the CEO of the DMA, And as you know, the DMA also encompasses the IDM and the preference services companies. So a really good panel, a great opportunity to pick their brains. I think I lost Clive, and I think I'll have to bring him back in again. He's got the bad line. We've also got Mr. Balding joining us, which is great from... All right, yeah, excellent. Right, so we're up to 56. We'll start now. General question, really, I guess, to all of you, and happy for whoever to pick this one out. You know, with the changes in the last 36 hours, I think it's fair to say that, you know, a lot of us have spent a lot of time, energy and money in the last few months in trying to make our office environments appropriate for COVID, to make them COVID friendly, to make it safe for our teams to come back to work. We have seen people working on a flexible basis, but we've also seen people drifting back into the office, which is great. I wonder, in light of the new decree that we should be looking to work from home again, what advice you're going to be giving to your teams, or what stance you'll be taking. I'm going to throw that one straight away. I'll just pick on Stephen, actually. Let's pick on Stephen Woodford, because I can see you there smiling in the centre there, Stephen. Let me unmute you, sir.
Thank you very much, Steve. I was at on Monday at White City at Publicis Media's pretty new headquarters, where they have something like 2,000 people in normal times based there. They've done a fantastic job on this enormous new office in terms of making it COVID safe and so on. And I think they were getting maybe 200 to 300 people coming back in, so still a very small proportion, you know, 10, 15% of their workforce. And they were really, as a management team, looking to put real energy into getting people back because they felt that the business would benefit from it. But they were also saying the real, and I'm sure everybody around on the call would echo this, is the weird hybrid world that we're in at the moment is that if you do go back into the office, and you know, some firms have been back for 7-8 weeks, you're still having this mixture of a lot of people are not back. So you've got people in the meeting room, but then you've got people on screens at the same time. So you know, clearly we're all going to be primarily back working from home and working on screens again. So at least that makes that simpler. And I think the focus of effort that has been on getting people back into the office is now going to be presumably put elsewhere. And I think the key challenge, and I've heard this expressed in a number of ways from different business leaders, is the difference between maintaining a business and growing a business. And particularly in creative businesses, a very strong sense that growth really comes from collaboration and being able to work together and getting across the table from colleagues or clients. And that's, albeit you can have lots of contact through screens, you don't get the same quality of contact. So in some ways, I think it's better to have some certainty. So rather than being in this constant transition between lockdown to then a hybrid, then to gradually, you know, trying to get maybe 50, 60% of people back into the office on a 3-4 day a week basis. At least we know likelihood is next 6 months, it's going to be like this. And then I think we're learning so fast, and we're proving to be such, like every industry, such a rapid adapters to change. I hope what we're going to learn in the next 6 months is how to grow businesses as well as just sustain them. And particularly address all of the cultural and sort of team challenges that come from this in terms of, you know, people reporting. There's been lots of academic studies that show after 6 months, the downsides of this kind of working start to really come through, and start, you know, the balance starts to become much more equal. Whereas a lot of people have talked about the positives up to this point. It starts becoming much more of a balance in terms of the downsides outweighing the positives. So I think that's where the effort's going to be, is making this work as best we can to hopefully, in a way, be coming back in the spring, but perhaps coming back in a more determined fashion, because there may, you know, if things go really well, there may well be the start of a vaccination program and a proper return to normality. So a long answer, sorry, Stephen, but those are the things that strike me after reflecting on Boris last night.
So it's interesting. Your reading is that we're back to working at home. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you'll see, Charles, for your members, you know, it's kind of problematic because of the print trade. It's a difficult business at the best of times. But actually being able to be back in the factory and not be back in the factory. How's that going to work? And obviously the impact then that will have on the direct marketing industry too. Charles? Is Charles frozen in his car? I think he is. Okay, well, I'm going to address that question if I may to Francis.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. We have over this period hosted regular leader lunches, as we call them. They used to be physical.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Can you hear me okay, Stephen?
Sorry, you're cutting across there.
Can you hear me?
We just about, yeah. Let's just Francis finish his point. We'll come back to you if I may.
Okay, thanks. So we host these regular gatherings of chief execs and MDs and comms directors. And we hosted one yesterday that took place just as the PM was doing his statement in the Commons. And inevitably, conversation turned to office arrangements. And their initial response was no change. Every one of the agencies...
I think there's a delay.
Every one of the agency heads on the call said that they intended continuing to give their staff the option of going into the office if they felt that they would work better from the office than from home. And all of them reflected on the problems, not just of maintaining and growing a business, as Stephen correctly said, but also the mental health pressures on their junior members of the team, which are building, and their view that it was in the best interests of those staff who felt they needed to get out of home, often in shared accommodation and so on, to go back to the office. So their immediate reaction was no change to the way they were behaving. Having spoken with people today, some people are interpreting it as let's go back to where we were a couple of months ago. The majority are not, and I in my industry anyway, and I think people will take a little while to decide what the appropriate course of action is. We're in this sort of hinterland, and I think we all just need to take a bit of a pause and reflect for a moment about the new model of working.
Indeed, and I think what's quite interesting there is touching on the mental health conundrum too, because it's almost a triangle here between the economic pressure to get people back to work versus the reality, obviously, of where COVID is now. Then, obviously, people's mental state at the moment, because I also have witnessed a significant impact, obviously, on people's mental health across this period, and a number of our members, frankly, are burnt out. You know, people have basically been managing businesses, keeping businesses afloat, and as Stephen suggested, you know, you can do that for a few months, but actually 6 months in, it's a different beast. Charles, you're back with us now. We can't see you, but we can hear you. We were saying, you know, for your membership, obviously, you know, they're in the factories, they're in the hard end of the business. How the hell is the print industry going to keep going if you're now telling people to work from home again?
Well, it's a good point, Stephen. And just to check, can you hear me okay at the moment?
We can, yeah.
Yes, good. Sorry, Francis, if I cut across you. There must have been a delay on the sound, so apologies for that. Well, I did so 2 points to this really. If we look at our organisation, we've got about 55 people spread across the country supporting the industry with health and safety and HR and apprenticeship training. And our approach at the start was to go for kind of what we call remote first. So if we could support remotely, we would, but we would see businesses face to face where that was possible. What's happened in our industry is that something like 70% of the industry saw about a 70% drop in demand at the kind of peak of the crisis. And whilst that's come back, it's still now about 70% of what it was last year. Sites have been reopening. We've managed to support them in that, to do that safely. But their biggest issue, to be honest, up until yesterday's announcement, was more around uncertainty in demand. And later on, what we picked up immediately on the rule of 6, though, was that for the larger print companies, it's not a huge deal, but for the high street and smaller print companies, it's had an immediate effect on all those social events and the collateral prepared for social events and small corporate events that suddenly, were in the schedule are now getting pulled again, and that's a really significant issue, and that's something that we're making very clear to government at the moment.
Thank you, Chris. Can I come to you? Because obviously the impacts from the DMA point of view, you can see what happens in the print industry and vice versa. The two of you are inextricably linked in some respects. Obviously, DMA and the whole area of direct and CRM is so much larger than that. But what's your view? What's happening to your members at this time?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And hopefully I've sorted out my microphone issues. So hopefully you can hear me now. I'll pick up a couple of points from Francis and Charles. In terms of our office, we had opened 2 days a week voluntarily only from August, in particular to serve staff members who had indicated they were struggling at home, and that is about 10%, so about 8 of our 80 people. We moved in September to 5 days a week, 10 to 4, again, purely voluntarily. And we decided yesterday to make no change to that. I was actually in the office and I talked to the people that were in, which tends to be a small group of regulars. And they all articulated the difficulties of their home working environment and how much they value being in the office. So we're just going to continue. So essentially we ignored Boris's encouragement to go back to work more fully, and we're going to ignore his comments yesterday and just keep the office open, but voluntarily. In terms of our members, yes, 19% have had a positive effect through COVID, which is mainly CRM, data analytics, technology providers, but 76 have had a negative effect. And to pick up Charles's number, our members are currently reporting as of early September, business returned to about 72% of normal trading, which is still 28% down on prior year. Now that's much better than 53% that they were reporting in April and May, but recovering less than half of what they had lost. So I think there's increasing concerns, obviously, that yesterday's necessary developments will reduce the recovery, will slow down the recovery, and that will have a knock-on effect on how quickly we get back to 95, 100% of normal trading. But we're hopeful that we will keep inching in the right direction. So I don't think we see yesterday as reversing the trend of recovery, just slowing it down and taking longer to get where we need to be.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm like, at the moment, I'm actually going to ask Julian a question, because it kind of relates to my next question with Clive, which is, what we have seen in a positive way over the last few months is that the independent agencies, and I know that a number of you represent both independent and network agencies around the world, but in particular, the independent agencies seem to me to be actually responding to these challenges more quickly and more focused, obviously, on the impacts on their clients and so on. Now, that's a massive generalisation on my part, and of course I would say that because obviously I work in the independent sector, but I really wanted to get Clive's view on that. And then Tina too, I know you're somewhere on this call because you're going to be interviewing Mark Reed later on this morning, aren't you, at the conference you're attending? So we might pick your brains and insist that you ask him that question too. So Clive, what's your thoughts? I mean, tell us a little bit about the Alliance, first of all.
Thanks, Stephen. Good morning, everybody. The MAG on the 1st of September rebranded to the Alliance of Independent Agencies. It was already being muted before COVID, but COVID really accelerated it. As much through these sessions about the collaboration with the likes of Pimento, the Network One, Agencynomics, that kind of idea of like-minded individuals coming together, all representing the independent agency community. And therefore, for us to put independence at the heart of everything that we were about seemed to be the right thing to do, because MAAG didn't necessarily reflect that. And so we set an arbitrary time of the 1st of September and everything pulled together. and our membership is exclusively that. It's only about businesses which are in the independent sector, and therefore to the point of the how these businesses are done through COVID, clearly these are businesses that maybe don't have the same strength of balance sheet as group companies and larger companies do have. However, through COVID, they've shown a resilience, a agility, a creativity, and the mere fact that they are not super tankers that need turning around, a WPP or a group agency, they've been able to make some significant changes very quickly to address the market. So whilst they have been down anywhere between 30 and 70%, they have been rebuilding the business, not up to the levels that they were before, unless their client base is something like Amazon, and therefore they're ahead of the game. But in terms of their bottom line, they've been showing a greater return because they've been actually able to shift quite a significant amount of overhead. Now, it's all comparative. It might be percentage-wise, it might be relatively high, but we might be talking about 7 or 8 people losing property, which a number of them have done, and are not looking at making an adjustment to that property until early next year, when there is great certainty, has reduced their P&Ls quite significantly. So surprisingly, and I've been on calls with Chris in the past where there have been concerns about businesses going out of business. We're not seeing that. We're seeing, smaller businesses, but we're not seeing the same kind of economic hardship that actually might see them disappear. And I think that's the heart of the independence in terms of their ability to reshape themselves in that agility, which others might not be able to make the most of.
Thank you, Clive. I mean, we'll come back to that point in a moment, because obviously we've got the end of the furlough period at the end of October. I know a number of you are lobbying quite hard with government to ensure that the creative industries are supported beyond that, but there is a real likelihood that there'll be significant reductions in headcount right across the industry, independents and groups. Julian, can I just turn to you for a second? For those that don't know Julian is Chief Executive of Network One. They, in respects, are kind of like an international version of Pimento, and they work with agencies, about 1,000 agencies around the world. I'd be interested to know, how are your international agencies viewing the UK market just now, and what are they doing differently to us in terms of dealing with COVID?
Well, the Europeans feel basically sorry for the UK because they think we're daft to be leaving the EU at this particular moment. That's what I pick up from them. But I think what I would say is a couple of things. Firstly, I want to echo Clive's point about independents can move faster and collaborate well. And there was a very interesting initiative launched last week called Land of Independence, which some of you may have seen. And this is about 12 or 15 of the leading independent media agencies in the UK, not forming themselves into an association or collective, but getting together to run a marketing, publicity and social media campaign, encouraging clients to work with independents. And the interesting thing is, they got pretty much all of the top independent agencies in the UK to sit around a table, to put their hands in their pocket and to do something collective. And I thought that was quite impressive and quite interesting. If I'm looking at it from an international perspective, I think the two phenomenon that I see is, obviously there is a kind of a regional wave effect. Southeast Asia is on a different time scale from Europe, which is on a different time scale from the Americas. So there is, people are coming back to work, leaving work, having a second wave, not having a second wave at different times. But if you sort of take that out, I mean, the underlying pattern I see is that in countries which have a decentralized industry, in other words, they are not mostly piling into a single big city, are much more likely to be back at work and starting to function normally, back in the office at work, at least 50%, and sometimes, a lot more than that. It seems to me there's a big city phenomenon here. If our industry is mostly in London, if you talk to New York, they are finding the same thing, and other big world cities as well. just the fact of getting to the office is such a nightmare for people. You know, people don't want to go in public transport. They can't afford cars, and if they could, they'd clog the cities. So we're seeing, you know, big cities still in a problem that's still out. Smaller cities, much more kind of coming in and starting to work normally. And it is also true that, you know, it's much easier if you are a small business because you're used to collaborating with more people. You're less used to having everything in-house. And I think it is easier for you to pivot, and a small group of people getting together is much easier than a large group of people getting together. Yeah, we see, the other thing we've seen is a lot of clients who want to meet with agencies for ideation sessions and tissue sessions are starting to rent rooms outside. So not meet in the agency, which has potential issues, not least for the agency looking a bit empty, not meet in the client's office because, you know, outsiders coming into a client's office is very discouraged. But, you know, rent a room in a local hotel. So we actually started a business to rent our own office out to people who don't want to be in the office, but do need to get together for a day here and there. So I hope that's not too much, but those are some of the observations that I'd make from what we've seen.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I'm kind of get a counterpoint of view because Tina, you introduced, you were interviewing Mark earlier on, who most of you know is the CEO of WPP. What was his view? What was he saying?
We spent time talking about the Great British Bake Off because that was delayed by 15 minutes yesterday, which worried me, obviously. We talked about Sorrell's view on stuff. I mean, he was fairly optimistic, I have to say. You know, he just feels they're in a good shape from WPP's point of view. I didn't get to ask him your good question about independent agencies versus holding companies, but he felt from a WPP point of view, revenues were down about 10-15%. That was all. They stood in the trenches with their clients. They've done stuff that's over and above what's in their contract. They sort of looked at negotiating out of a lot of contracts with clients and a lot of media owners, a lot of innovation. So a lot of examples in the States, for example, where where they've worked with different clients about doing, like, for an off-license brand, delivering alcohol curbside. So they've been very innovative. He was quite optimistic about clients, quite optimistic about how the agencies have responded. Didn't really cover headcount, didn't really cover in the office. It was interesting though, because when I had a preamble with him 2 weeks ago, he was in the office like 4 days a week, but he's now at home. So I didn't really cover, you know, actually what they're doing from WPP point of view. Stress and mental health, which obviously this big thing, obviously I know Stephen, you support under Pimento, you know, quite keen to make sure that their staff were okay, especially sort of the younger members. Well, we didn't really go into the younger members of staff, because that's a bit controversial from his comment a few weeks ago. But yeah, on the whole, he was optimistic long term. He said, you know, we had 6 months of this, we've got another 6 months of it. Pitches, he spoke about pitches, how actually, you know, for one pitch, he sent 27 people to LA. And obviously, from a holding company point of view, you know, that's expensive. I think their travel costs were down 47% in Q1. So he feels actually it's a new way of working. He talked about agile production, you know, going from, is it waterfall to agile? So, you know, how a shoot used to take 16 weeks, it now takes 16 days. And I did challenge him with my cynical procurement person's hat on to say, why did it take a pandemic for you to do it from 16 weeks to 16 weeks to 16 days? And he sort of really laughed and didn't really answer that. But overall, you know, as you'd expect him to be quite bullish about WPP, but didn't really go into specifics about effect on staff in terms of headcount or in the office. It was almost like business as normal. They adapted really quickly. He sees them being status quo for the next 6 months. He thinks there's going to be a vaccine, and he's optimistic about that, and just about how in 12 months' time we'll all be working this way, because actually we wouldn't have known the old way of working, which I thought was quite interesting. So the last, you know, 6 months already gone, another 6 months of doing virtual pitches and using technology more. So actually in 6 months' time, it'd be like, we can't remember 12 months ago of how we used to work, which I thought actually was quite interesting. So yeah, he was, yeah, it was good actually, yeah.
I mean, it's good to hear is positive as you suggested. So I mean, I think that is a role of leadership at the moment is to be positive, to take your teams with you and actually look at the upside, because there have been certainly in this period some really significant shifts in behaviour and ways of working, as you rightly say, some of which hopefully we will retain at some point in the future. You touched on people there, and I think people are at the centre of our business. It's a real cliche, I know, but the reality is obviously agencies will be worried come the end of October about the furlough and about the end of that, to what extent they're going to be able to bring people back into their businesses and continue to fund them. I'll start again with Stephen and we'll go around the table very quickly. Do you get, I mean, obviously you're in conversations with the leaders of those agencies on a daily basis, Stephen. Do you feel that they've actually made the trimming that they've already need to do, or do you think they've actually got a bank of talent that's basically funded at the moment by government that they're going to have to let go?
I think it's very hard to make a generalisation because one, I think people are being, the changes that they're making in their businesses, the narrative that I've heard most often is we're doing the things that we probably would have had to do over the next 2 to 3 years anyway, but we're doing them in a more accelerated fashion. So they're restructuring their businesses. They're not just, if you like, taking advantage of the cushion of the furlough scheme, albeit that has been a very welcome cushion. I think most people seem to be thinking quite radically about the shape of their businesses, and they've been making changes pretty much from the onset of the crisis. And again, I've got no empirical evidence for this, and Chris may well have much more from his survey. But it feels to me that actually the changes in people's businesses and the structure and the cost base and so on have been happening all the time, pretty much since this started. And if anything, we're at the end of that process. So as furloughed staff do come back, they're coming back into restructured jobs or restructured businesses, or as part of that, they're not being brought back. But that's my feeling about the way it's happened. People have not been waiting for the end of the scheme to take action.
Some of that's already baked in then. Chris, is that the case?
Yeah, I think we're seeing about 37% of members have said they have made redundancies or are going to make redundancies. And then a slightly greater percentage than that planning to really cut back on their use of freelancers. And I think that's a pain point because many agencies over the last couple of decades have moved to less full-time staff and more use of freelance contributors. And I think not enough has been done by the government yet for the freelance community that supports our industry in many different types of job functions. So yeah, we're seeing that there will be an impact, but not for every company. And as we say in our membership, we're lucky we have e-commerce players that are doing well. We have CRM providers and other MarTech businesses that are doing quite well. But everyone's feeling the impact without a doubt.
Francis, would you concur with that view in terms of headcount reduction?
So I'd say about a half of our members have made redundancies or will make redundancies. That the majority of those redundancies have happened already, but I think that as furlough comes to an end, there will be a further wave of them, sadly. And that's not just because of furlough, it's because, and I think I said this in July, because of deferred tax and rent and rates and so on. So I think there is a second wave of redundancies coming, but it'll be smaller than the first one. If we'd spoken last week, I would have said that there was definitely a recovery going on, as reported back by most of PRCA members. We'll see what the impact of the announcements is in the next few weeks, I guess. And just to address the independents versus groups point, if that's of interest, I don't see any really discernible advantage for independents or disadvantage either. I would say that that assessment from Mark Reed of the group being down between 10 and 15 is probably the same for Omnicom and others. And I would say, and I've said this consistently through this, I think by the end of the year, our industry as a whole will be down by 20% in terms of revenue. I think individual companies have changed their models with varying degrees of speed. And those degrees of speed have not related to whether they are independent or they are group owned. They're related to the leadership at the top and the agility of the business to change.
I'm willing to believe that, Francis, and I think everyone is going through a significant amount of change. I think the point that was being made earlier on was that obviously if you're smaller and you're more agile, it's quicker to get there sometimes.
Sometimes, yes, but really, from the range of our members that goes from a one-man band to Edelman or Omnicom, there is no discernible difference in terms of agility between big companies and small companies. Every company is different in my experience.
Charles, your membership, obviously, you're focused very much on development, you're focused very much on skill training. What are you doing at the moment in order to reskill people for obviously a change in the economy and a change really with this whole area of digitalization? I know print has actually had a little bit of a renaissance in the last year or so, but it's been in particular areas, particularly around the digital space. But is there a move to focus on reskilling and retraining people in different areas?
Actually, it's been really interesting, and a lot of what's been said already is extremely consistent with what's been happening in the print industry. And we've seen, for example, about 40% of members are looking at changes in employment levels. Actually, apprenticeship training has held up really, really well, which has been quite a surprise. I think there is a real determination to try to hang on to core skills in our industry, which is quite encouraging. And our mix on apprenticeship training is about 40% trades, 20% leadership and development, and using the firm using scenarios to continue to deliver apprenticeship training. So, I mean, actually, overall, it's held up quite well. In terms of changes, back to Stephen's point, I mean, the changes as the strategic changes have accelerated, really. So we've moved away from volume towards more targeting. But actually, I think everyone saw that coming down the tracks anyway. It's just been accelerated. And I'm not sure that's had an immediate effect on demand for skills training.
I know at the last call there was kind of two big call outs. One was about actually how can the associations collaborate and work together on this area. Chris, I know you've been reaching out and to Stephen and been initiating opportunities to collaborate both on the training side, retraining and repositioning side and so on. What does that mean, and how can other organisations get involved with that?
Yeah, there's a program that we've developed with a number of the associations that are members of the AA, and the AA is leading in the dialogue with BASE and other departments, but we call it skill up, power up, level up. And the idea is to harness the skills the economy needs to drive the recovery, but to use industry associations and business organizations to do that, rather than other types of organizations that maybe the Department for Education historically works with. And the essential premise is very simple. All of the qualifications and skill set development that an industry association creates is based on the practical skills that the members require, often developed by the membership community to serve the needs of those businesses. So, it's immediately employable skills because they're big skills, whether it's, the banking sector or the data and marketing sector or digital advertising. That if the business organization has developed it for its community, they are the skills that that community is looking for. Mm-hmm. And a secondary byproduct of that, if the government goes ahead with it, which is essentially the idea to provide grants, so an industry association that has a set of skills available to deliver online would match a price, and then anybody who wants to take that at that price, it would be paid for by the government. And that would funnel revenue to industry associations as well, who, like everybody else, are struggling a little bit. So that's on the individual side, and it would allow the government to identify the skills that it sees as primarily required to drive the recovery, and then invest in those through the organizations that have ready-made learning available to roll out at scale via online, completely nationally as it's online immediately.
Stephen, sorry, I think you wanted to say something.
I was just going to add to, I think this is a fantastic scheme, and we've got really good support from across our membership, and also more widely support from other professional services and business services groups. And I had the chance actually to talk to the Secretary of State about it yesterday in a round table about how we can help Britain's post-Brexit competitiveness. And this is one of those quick, as Chris was saying, very, very attuned to the needs of industry schemes that could be very cost effective and help people find new roles and retrain and upskill and so on. So we're pushing very hard for it. We're lobbying very hard at BEIS to get some government funding. It would be one of those things where a relatively small amount of government funding would go a very long way into meeting some skills gaps and helping smooth out the undoubted spike in unemployment.
On the basis that obviously, all the work that we've all been doing together in the last few months has been about actually how to collaborate and support each other and our members and various associations. Is this something that could be made freely available to non-members of the DMA, non-members of the Advertising Association?
Well, the program would be available to every citizen in the country, and our we based the sort of operational proposal on the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, where if an organization has a ready-made online qualification that matches a skill the government decides to fund, they just register in the way that restaurants did for the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Then the citizen comes and looks at the menu of opportunities, picks one, presto, books, just like going in to get your 2-for-1 meal. The process was really simple from the customer's point of view. It just happened at your bill. And then it's as simple as that. And it would be open to any industry organization that has skills that are on the menu and willing to match the prices that would be predetermined. So a fixed menu that makes it really easy. So a certificate, a diploma, a postgraduate diploma would be at certain fixed prices. The issue is more about ensuring that everybody's terminology matches the same level of learning hours, because many of the organizations are institutes in their own right who approve their own qualifications. So you have to make sure there's a certain level of standardization of what is meant by a certificate, what is meant by a diploma, and so on. But otherwise, it should be fully democratic in relation to the skills that BEIS in the end determines are the ones worth investing in. And it may be a pilot program to begin with.
Thank you. I'll urge anyone to get involved in that and support that initiative, because I think inevitably we will be losing people and talent at the end of October, and actually being able to retrain them and get back into work is going to be incredibly important. And even those that we aren't be losing, it's important that we continue to invest in talent and find ways to upskill them. It kind of leads neatly on to a conversation around the concept of outplacement and to what degree the associations are working with their membership to provide them with outplacement services, because for a lot of people, they won't be made redundant before. This will be the very first time they've enjoyed the benefits of basically sitting at home again and not getting paid, as to what they're currently doing. And I think that is both worrying and alarming for a lot of people. And I wonder, is there a role, is there something that as associations and organisations we can be providing some sort of outplacement service to help people through training, through preparing them, their CV, interview training and support, building confidence and getting them back into jobs? Or is that already in hand at an association level? Francis.
We're doing it by the recruitment consultancies in the market because quite simply they are best placed, best skilled to deliver those services, and we are best placed to coordinate they're offering to the industry.
And I think we should give a shout out to Grace Blue and Transition, which the Ad Association and ourselves, and I think the DMA and others have taken part in, which is happening in both the UK and the US, where there's a platform for people who've been made redundant, tips in terms of building out CV. There's a jobs boards on there. So we're putting all our information in terms of outsourcing onto the transition platform.
And we're doing the same. And it's a great platform. It's not a unique platform, but it's a great platform.
Yeah.
Charles, what happens in the print world when it comes to this area?
Well, there's actually, it's a really good point. There's a really large charity called the Printing Charity. I don't know how well you can hear me, Steve, but the Printing Charity's remit covers print, publishing, and journalism. They have a fairly significant endowment, and they're very keen to extend support to employers who are restructuring, and that includes outplacement support. And they work with us and with a third-party specialist in providing that service.
And I think on the same point,
so
actually.
Sorry, carry on.
I think, sorry, on the same point, I think we should also mention NABS, who have a career development service as well. And the inquiries coming to them around mental health and career development has grown exponentially through all of this. But again, as a charity for our industry, NABS is the place to go.
So in terms of some of the sort of positive things that are happening out there at the moment, there are lots of good stories, and Chris was alluding to the fact that a lot of the data agencies are doing very well at the moment, analytics boys and girls. Generally, we're seeing a real upturn for digital. I noticed on this call we've got a few of our agencies in the event space on this call, and I know they particularly, I think, Will, you've gone to a lot of effort, if you're still there, Will Mould, into actually looking at how you can actually support the virtual experience world. And Lindsay up in Scotland, I know you're doing something similar at the moment. It's good to see you back in the office, Will. I'm assuming you are back in the office there. What was your reaction to yesterday's news? And also, Lindsay, what was your reaction?
For me, yeah, it was very disappointing, obviously, because we had the October 1st date where we were going to, we were waiting on what the process was going to be with regards to doing meetings and conferences, etc. So with that being postponed, is a bit of a blow, and I'd personally begun to see a bit of an uptake from clients and a bit more activity from them. So we're just going to wait and see how this affects them. But we've definitely seen an upturn. Whereas the first few months, our clients just said, "Don't call us, don't speak to us. We're dealing with our own crap here." They're now really much more engaged with us, and they know they've got to do stuff. And as you say, the virtual and hybrid area is beginning to be taken up, and we've got a lot of conversations going on about producing stuff for that as well, because they need to speak to buyers, they need to speak to consumers, etc. And this is hopefully a way of doing that.
In terms of the necessary cuts you've had to make in your own business, do you feel you've done those now, and you've got sort of the right structure and resource to go forward?
With regards to headcount, probably yes. With regards to how what other savings we can make, there will be other savings we will have to make, whether that's further salary reductions or something along those lines. Then yeah, we're going to have to do some more things if we're going to get through it really, and commit to that for the next 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Will. Sorry to jump on you like that, but Lindsay, up in Scotland, then, or up in the
Hi there. Hi.
Floating through the air or the ether. You're in the same space as the guys and girls down at XYZ, albeit you were even more focused on the corporate market, on running conferences and so on. What's the state of play for you now?
Well, as you mentioned, we are on day 3 of our first really big virtual event for a surgical society, and it's gone really well. I think there's about 2,000 people online. So already there's discussions with them about next year, but also they see so much potential. Sorry, that's my dog. They see so much potential to go forward permanently with hybrid events. So I'm just going to close my door. So I think that's the new normal, one might say. In the meantime, for us, yes, the corporate has just, you know, fallen away, as it were. And yesterday's news, I think, for me, perhaps just gave us more, you know, gave us confirmation for a basis to plan to. It didn't surprise me. We'd kind of drawn up plans to cope with that anyway. But for us, the critical point, I think, comes as to whether planning activity and therefore income starts to kick in, you know, towards the, you know, maybe February time. That's when it starts to hurt us, I think, that we need to see some cash flow happening then. So our baseline is association management. Unfortunately, that's bolstered our income through this period, in addition to this virtual event. But we are now getting new inquiries through for hybrid events and for virtual, but we just don't see that much of an income stream coming through from virtual alone.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is you're on call with lots of associations, so I'm sure I'll take the opportunity to tap them up afterwards. But just sort of generally, this is an opportunity to ask the associations to, you know, what more can they be doing at this point in time for you? What sort of support do you anticipate all of the people on this call you're going to need over the next 6 months, and how is that any different from the support that you've actually had in the last 6 months? So that's sort of general opportunity here to ask questions in the last sort of 10 minutes that we have on this call. So just want to open up the call, really. Does anybody want to raise their hand? And it's a great opportunity to speak to the association's direct. David, just unmute. You have to unmute yourself there.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen. Thanks, guys. My question is the ability of the agency associations to influence government policy in terms of the whole of the industry and how geared up we are to do that. I mean, in my opinion, furlough has been a hugely damaging exercise, especially an expensive one. I've been, you know, talking to a lot of agencies who haven't been able to talk to their clients and do business because their clients are on furlough. Originally, that the staff of the agency, they had to select certain staff to be furloughed, which means their expertise was taken completely out of the agency. So therefore, it became a roadblock in many ways. And those people that, the other aspect of furlough is that people were paid not to work, which is one of the most damaging things you can ever do to a business or an industry. Instead, I think on the continent, what they've done is instead of paying it on an employee basis, they paid the companies a subsidy so that they could actually innovate. And I think that's been, you know, when you go through a situation like that, it's really important to innovate, not just to take people out of the equation and park them. And I think what's going to happen, you know, those people that have been parked will actually end up being the ones that are made redundant, which, you know, puts a whole new spin on the term for he's a jolly good furlough. But, you know, and I think if we as a creative industry could have been much more influential with the government right from the beginning, not just in furlough, but in many other aspects of this whole thing, I think it would have been much better for everybody.
Can I just add to that, David? I sit on the board of a company that we've got offices in America and here. And if I look in terms of the performance of the Americans, where we were given a loan under the CARES loan, which was predicated on us keeping people employed. We weren't allowed to lay anybody off. And by keeping those people employed, they, under the leadership that was given, has grown the business. as opposed to the people here who we furloughed didn't have the thing, and therefore we didn't see the same growth. So I agree absolutely in that position of, using money to make people sit at home when actually they could be used more positively. But in terms of our ability to influence, I think I'd hand that over to Stephen, because we certainly use the Advertising Association as our place of getting involved with government, and they are the place where we lobby through.
Thank you, Clive. It's certainly, when you look at the take-up of the furlough scheme, it was by far the most popular scheme of all the government support schemes, followed by the bounce-back loans. So of all the measures that government introduced to help the firms through the crisis, furlough was by far the most heavily used. Leaving aside the points you make about whether it's whether it's a good thing to pay people to be idle or not, clearly it'd be better to be. I think the subsidy route would have been a smarter route to do it, but that's what we were given. And we were lobbying as hard as we could around making that, particularly around things like the loans, the C bills, which were not fit for purpose, and bounce back loans were a response to that. But where we do our best lobbying around these things is that we combine forces with other, so something like the Creative Industries Council or Professional Business Services Council. Those two umbrella bodies, which we're a very active player in both, account for about 25% of the economy. So we do get listened to. We've had more contact with ministers and civil servants in the last 6 months than probably in the previous 6 years, which should be no surprise. But there has been an extraordinarily high level of contact, and my impression of those contacts is, as an example, Alex Sharma on the call yesterday. He does a regular call every month. It was every 2 weeks. Wants to hear what's happening. Wants to hear from the sharp end. Wants to hear what people in business think about all these moves. And that's true across particularly BAYS, but also DCMS, which is the department particularly responsible for our industry. And we are doing our best to lobby for things that we think will really help. As Chris talked earlier about the sector skills training proposal, which we think is potentially a very good measure. We're lobbying for a tax credit, which I've talked about before on this call. That's still sort of grinding through the policy process, but it's in consideration currently as part of the spending review in the Treasury. So it's one of probably hundreds and hundreds of different spending proposals that are being ground through the Treasury machine, but that's still being looked at. So we hope that we'll make progress on that. We've already been through 3, if you like, hurdles of clearance on that, and we've got through each one. So it gets tougher as we go. So, but those are things where we're trying to make a significant difference for our industry. We're also lobbying for support for exports, because a lot of the firms here will be selling to overseas clients. We've put in a big bid with the Department of International Trade for support for our exports group, which again is in the spending review. So we'll know later, a couple of months what we get for next year for that. But we're hoping for some really good support from government to work in partnership to boost exports. So there's lots of strands of work that are specific to our industry, and then there are lots of things where we join forces with other like-minded sectors where we have similar needs to make sure that we're lobbying as part of the biggest possible army.
Could I just add something very, very quickly? 2 quick points. One to David Bla's point around the furlough scheme, which looked like a rescue package and welcome, but clearly has been putting off the inevitable for a lot of businesses, which we're going to need to pivot anyway. And this gave them, I guess, more breathing space and cash to do that. And once the furlough scheme comes to an end, then the inevitable will happen, I suspect. But I would just like to thank the various associations represented here, because I suspect it's been a period of massive stress for you as industry representatives, and trying to do a certain amount of crystal ball gazing to support your members. And largely, I think, from what I've seen, there's been some outstanding support that you've given. Chris at the DMA, I think you guys have done a really brilliant job at trying to make sense of this for everybody, and deliver some, very targeted, sensible advice, as well as the lobbying that you guys are doing with government. So I think that's brilliant. The webinar series that the Network One have done throughout this COVID thing has been exceptional. And incredibly valuable at staying connected globally, but also being inspired, because one of the things that no doubt will suffer during this lockdown period is imagination and how people think and share ideas, etc. So I think that's been a really valuable series to continually prod and prompt. Likewise with Pimento as well, an excellent series of webinars there. So thanks to you guys for all the work that you've been doing, because it must have felt like a thankless task at many points during this. But well, I for one are thanking you for it.
Ian, thank you very much. I think we all appreciate that, and also I'd like to thank obviously today's panel. Sadly, as ever, we've run out of time, but thank you for coming back again. The associations, I hope you realise that we are very grateful for both your time and the work you're doing at the moment. I'd also like to just make everyone aware that the Pimento 6 PM Club is back, albeit a new time, 5 PM, and albeit virtual tomorrow afternoon. If you haven't had an invite, and if anyone on this call, you're all invited, please drop me a line at stephen.knight@pimento.co.uk and we'll get an invite out to you. It's being hosted by Savanta tomorrow at 5 o'clock, an agency that many of you know well. We look forward to continuing with these weekly talks and conversations, and we're committed to supporting all our members and all the associations we work closely with throughout this period. So keep your ideas coming, keep collaborating, keep connected, and keep supporting each other. And most importantly, if you do sense that you're feeling a bit down now and again, we've got lots of people who will be very happy to pick you up and have some encouragement. Join us on our netwalking. We're now doing netwalking as an alternative way to networking. So if you want to come on one of our netwalks, you're very welcome to come to those too. So there's lots of things happening, lots of ways to get involved and lots of ways to support each other. So thank you once again. Thank you to Francis. Thank you to Stephen. Thank you to Clive. Thank you to Charles. And thank you to Chris. And also thank you to our other contributors, including Mr. Balding. So great day. Enjoy the fine weather. And we hope to see you all again next Wednesday. And for those that can join us tomorrow afternoon at 5 PM. Have a great day.
Thanks, Stephen.